Hello, thank you all. Thank you very much. I hope everybody had some lunch. I hope everybody had a cup of coffee, maybe 2 cups of coffee, 3 cups of coffee. Before I invite our guest here, I just want to say a word about the title of our event and our guest and how they relate. You have 3 basic ideas here, obviously: Kosovo, liberal democracy, and fragility. Now, fragility and Kosovo, that one's easy. Kosovo is a fragile place in a fragile part of the continent. Liberal democracy in Kosovo, a little bit more complicated. Kosovo aspires to be a liberal democracy, and in many ways is a liberal democracy. It's also, of course, a place where ethnic nationalism is extremely salient, and ethnic nationalism and liberal democracy don't always mix easily. This is a classic theme of political science and political theory. The cool thing about GLOBSEC is that you don't just have to hear about that from people like me or academics or pundits. You get to hear about it from, for example, the president of Kosovo, which is pretty cool. So please join me in welcoming the president of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello again.
Nice to see you again. Please take a seat.
Thank you.
Madam President, I thought we could start our session today by talking a little bit about relations between Kosovo and Western Europe and the United States. How would you say the dynamic in those relationships has shifted in recent years, in your view?
The relationship between Kosovo and the United States is, for the people of Kosovo, for Kosovo as a country, the most important, the most existential, and the most indispensable relation of all of the alliances that we have built throughout the years. And I would say primarily because of our history. In the most darkest of hours for our people, it was the US that led the free world to come and save our lives, to save the people of Kosovo from an extermination that was planned against our people. And that was the foundation of the relationship that we've built in the past 25 years, although of course it dates back even much longer than that, because we've always seen the United States as the leader of the free world and as the country that was always outspoken when it comes to the gross violations of human rights of the people of Kosovo. Now, 1999 up to date, if we look at the history of this relation, it's full of successes. Practically from our right to be free, to our right to be independent, to the recognitions that we've achieved in the meantime, membership in international organizations, economic development, all the way to building our police force and our army. It has all been a joint success. And for that reason, is a relationship that we cherish absolutely very much. And according to the latest poll, 97% of the people of Kosovo see the United States as their primary ally, as their most important ally, and they do cherish this relationship. Now, nowadays, of course, you will hear from time to time statements of disagreement on between officials in the US and the government of Kosovo on some of the approaches, but never on the end goal or the fundamental values that we share. So there are no disagreements on the fact that both Kosovo and the United States want a Kosovo that is sovereign, independent in its current borders, successful, prosperous, multi-ethnic, based on its constitution. But I guess sometimes the approach towards maintaining a democratic, sovereign, strong Kosovo, and how do we achieve that, it can change. So the approach, the tactics, the nuances, there are differences to that, but there has never been, and there isn't right now, any difference whatsoever on what kind of Kosovo we want, what are the values that are at the very fundament of our relationship and at the very fundament of our countries. And I believe that when that is healthy, the foundations, then the rest, despite of challenges, can absolutely be overcome.
There's still agreement on the destination, but some arguing over how to get there.
Well, I would say even on how to get there, the disagreement again is not on what is the path, but perhaps on how fast to drive on that path. So it's not even on the path. So again, while of course I don't want to paint a rosy picture and say that everything is perfect, because I've been very public about my position as president, which is something that I've held in my more than 20 years in politics, that coordination with key allies is one of the most important aspects of our success, because when we coordinate with allies, especially our security allies in the ground, then success is more sustainable, is long-term. When we don't, it's just a momentary success. It might look good, it might sound good, but then it's much more fragile, and you can also make steps backwards. So as president, this is the position that I keep, and I strongly believe, and we've learned that. It's not like we were born knowing this, but we've learned, as many other countries around the world, that when you keep strong alliances, and of course with democratic countries, I'm not talking about the malign factors, but when you have these strong alliances, that is where your leverage, that is where your power lies. Our strongest power as a country lies in our partnerships. That has kept us strong, no matter the challenges across our history. Not everyone in Kosovo entirely agrees with what I'm saying, and that means that Kosovo is a healthy democracy too, the strongest and the most established democracy in our region, in fact.
In Euro-Atlantic institutions. And what do you see as the obstacles to those ambitions?
Now, oftentimes when we have this, change of leadership in the EU from one country to another, and it happens every year, I'm invited to have speeches and to speak to members of the European Union about the importance of Euro-Atlantic integration and the importance of European values. And I always mention how the people of Kosovo fought for what today is known as European civilization. At that time was known. Now it's democracy, human rights, rule of law, these kind of values. More than 500 years ago, our national hero, Gjergj Kastrioti, led the fight within Europe to maintain these values. And that has been the very foundation of our nation. Throughout our existence, we have fought for a Europe that is free, at peace, and based on the values that are most important to humankind, such as human rights, rule of law is extremely important, and so on. Now, yes, we are the only country in the Western Balkans that does not have a candidate status, despite of the fact that we are at a 100% alignment with every European Union common foreign security policy decision. We have aligned all of our sanctions against malign countries with the European Union. Since 2001, our parliament makes sure that each and every piece of legislation that we adopt is in full line with acquis communautaire. We make sure that all of our economic reforms are entirely in line with the European Union. And as I said, more than 95% of the people of Kosovo are in favor of European integration. So you have this pro-European sentiment, pro-NATO sentiment as well. You have people that are so eager to contribute. We have the youngest population in Europe, tech-savvy, multilingual, brilliant, the most tech-innovative and tech-competitive country in the Western Balkans. Again, most pro-democratic and civil liberties of all the other countries. So perhaps on your initial comment that ethno-nationalism thrives in Kosovo, in fact, that can be only far from the truth, because the truth is that Kosovo has the most advanced constitution, not just in the region, on European soil when it comes to minority community rights. And I challenge anyone to pick another country on European soil that gives a minority community with 3 to 4% within the population the right to veto any constitutional amendment, any piece of legislation that is of vital interest, any reform on the education system, anything related to human rights, anything related to religious and other fundamental freedoms, anything related to spatial planning, and so on and so forth. While Kosovo is that country, and we guarantee, apart from seats in the parliament and all of these rights, not just at the national level, but also at the local level, at the police, in the justice system, and so on, so that the minority communities can feel included, they can give a contribution to what we call in our constitution a multi-ethnic Kosovo, which we don't see as a threat, we see that as a value, as something with all of the cultures, the religions, that makes us richer, not weaker. Not poorer on values, but richer. And in that sense, among the people of Kosovo, you do not see ethno-nationalism. Among the people of Kosovo, you will see resilience on the European path. We have never looked elsewhere. We've never flirted with other parties or other forces, especially not the malign forces like Russia, China, and Iran, or even North Korea. We've picked the right friends in the sense that we share the same values with the Euro-Atlantic family. And then the challenge is, within the European Union, there are 5 countries that have not recognized Kosovo, who for their sometimes domestic political considerations, which we try to understand, but have become an obstacle to a country's willingness to also contribute to the strategic vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace, because a Europe whole, free, and at peace is impossible without the Western Balkans joining. And secondly, the obstacle is that we don't see a merit-based process. So a country that is only 46% compliant with the European Union Common Foreign and Security Policy, and obviously I'm talking about Serbia, gets the vast majority of the EU financial assistance, more than all the rest of us, 5 of us, that are 100% aligned with the European Union get together in terms of financial assistance. And of course, we don't really see the merit-based process which the EU talks about so much being taken into account. Otherwise, if that was the case, Kosovo would have been the front runner when it comes to European integration. But it's just too many domestic political considerations on the way.
Let me ask you a little bit about the EU. The EU is mediating these negotiations between Serbia and Kosovo, and at least from the outside, they don't seem to be making much progress. Why is that?
So, because, you know, in a negotiation, you have a table in between the 2 parties, which normally needs to be flat, in the sense that there needs to be an equal footing, equality between the 2 parties. What we see right now, what we face right now, is the table is all upside down. So, despite the fact that Kosovo has been negotiating with Serbia for the past more than 12 years, 13 years, about 40 agreements have been reached, including one very important one, the basic agreement and the Ohrid Annex the previous year. And if you look at the list of non-implementation of obligations from Serbia, it's very, very long. It would take us until tomorrow to just read it. And this is, you know, it's very easy to confirm. You don't have to trust my judgment or my interpretation of it. You just pick any agreement. Whether we're talking about the agreement of freedom of movement, or we're talking about the agreement on recognizing diplomas, or we're talking about the agreement on, you know, recognition of other documents, or returning of the cadastral records which Serbia has stolen from Kosovo in the 90s and so on. None of these agreements have been implemented, to a very important one from 2013, which obliges Serbia to dissolve all of its illegal parallel structures around Kosovo, but primarily in the north. Now, what happened in these past 10 years is that instead of dissolving those structures, Serbia has constantly strengthened them, to the extent that these illegal structures have turned into mafia gangs and have also turned into the biggest danger for the Serb community who lives in northern Kosovo.
What are these external structures specifically?
These illegal structures are groups of, you know, criminals that are paid by Serbia, appointed by Serbia, politically supported by Serbia, and right now, after they committed an act of aggression against Kosovo in September, are also hidden by Serbia within Serbia, so that they do not face justice for the acts of aggression, and also other crimes that they've committed, like murder against Serb politicians, like burning down houses and cars of Serbs in the north, like threatening kids in the kindergarten for Serbs in the north. So those who are suffering most from these mafia gangs paid by and supported by Vučić in Serbia are actually the Serbs in Kosovo. So all of this has happened in the past 10 years, and including the act of aggression against Kosovo last year. Despite of all of that, and despite of the long list of non-implementation by Serbia, guess which one is the party that is under measures by the EU? Is the party that is at a 100% alignment with the European Union on every common security and foreign policy decision? Is the party that never purchases weapons from Russia, China, or Iran? Is the party that 97% of whose people are in favor of the European Union? Is the party that has never committed an act of aggression against its neighbors, that does not destabilize its neighbors, that does not organize a coup against its neighbors, that does not use Russian MiG-29s to fly over their neighbors? That's the party that is under measures, Kosovo. So that's why the table is upside down. When you don't have equality as the very basics of any negotiation process, no one should, dream about tangible results that can also be implemented in the ground. And my final point on the dialogue, an agreement was reached February 23, and then it's annexed later on in 2023, which foresees obligations for both Kosovo and Serbia. According to the EU and the United States, and I agree with that interpretation, it's a legally binding treaty. Joseph Borrell, the High Rep, has also informed the UN Secretary General of the United Nations, as per practices in international law, that it's a legally binding treaty. But for all the experts out there, what happens if one of the parties formally withdraws from a treaty? It's a basic principle of international law. The other party has no obligation to implement it either. It's not that I want to oversimplify it. It's just like you enter into a contract for the sale of goods. You pay the price, you're asked to pay the price, and then and then you say, okay, it's good for the other party to never deliver goods? No. If the other party doesn't want to deliver the goods, you don't have to pay the price either. So again, not to oversimplify it, but we hear a lot from European bureaucrats, pacta sunt servanda, the contract should be respected. Yes, that's exactly what we want. But Serbia has formally withdrawn from this treaty through letters sent by its former prime minister to the European Union, through statements made by its president and its current prime minister, who say this is not a legally binding treaty and we will never implement it. Now, despite of them saying that, everyone in the European, well, not everyone, again, not to generalize, most in the EU say, well, Kosovo should unilaterally implement its obligations. Now, I strongly believe that we're in a situation where we need to bring back equality to the table. If parties are treated on an equal footing, then we can have success. And we are very confident that with the changes in the European Union, with the new High Rep coming up, that equality is going to come back to the table as that precondition to success. So we're confident and we're hopeful, but we're going to have to wait for a few months for those successes to be seen, I believe.
Okay. If you have a question, you can add it to Slido. You can also raise your hand. I'm going to take a couple audience questions. We'll start with one here from the Slido. Madam President, can you say more? This is an anonymous question. Can you say more about Kosovo's approach to media freedom and combating disinformation, particularly in the context of regional tensions?
So Kosovo has been a leader in the region when it comes to media freedoms and generally fundamental rights and freedoms of our people. That doesn't mean that we have not been facing a number of, and a rising aspect of propaganda and disinformation. It is extremely important that when we deal with disinformation and propaganda, which I believe are one of the biggest dangers to liberal democracies, which was the initial topic that we were supposed to talk about, we need to make sure that we're successful in that battle. Now, that needs to be done in full compliance with highest European standards, and there are a lot of countries that, despite not being entirely successful, because this is an ongoing battle, we need to see what they have achieved as successes and to learn from those successes. So yes, media freedom, freedom of speech are fundamental values of a democratic society, but as the European Court of Human Rights has decided on a number of cases, which is of course a model that we follow, media freedoms are are not limitless. They are limited to the extent that you do not risk national security, to the extent that you do not risk the lives of others, and you do not violate the integrity and the dignity of others. So based on these principles, we need to move ahead with, I would say, most robust, but based on highest EU standards, fight against disinformation and propaganda. Because since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russia only in that first year had tripled the amount of money that they use for propaganda and disinformation in the Western Balkans. It is in Russia's interest to open a new front against the West, and they will be looking for fragile, territories that are not part of NATO, but are within the European continent. So for that reason, we need to make sure that the support for the Western Balkans in terms of fighting disinformation and propaganda also rises. When it comes to EU support, I recently signed an agreement with the US government on programs that the US will be supporting us in fighting disinformation and propaganda, but we certainly need more support, because look, we constantly face cyber attacks and other kind of disinformation attacks, hybrid threats from Russia, but also from Iran, and some coming, from other malign factors as well, as a region, I would say, but also Kosovo particularly. In that sense, the more we work together, the stronger we will be towards those common enemies or opponents, which are spread through disinformation.
Okay, recurring theme this weekend. I hope you all join me in thanking President Osmani. Thank you so much for your detailed answers and for having this chat with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.